Welcome to TK Q&A, questions and answers about transitional kindergarten. I am your host, Ami Moser. I'm the Universal Pre-Kindergarten Coordinator for the Kern County Superintendent of Schools. Today, I'm super excited about the guest we have. We have Julie Kurtz with us today. Julie, welcome to the podcast. Could you take a minute to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm so grateful to be here with you today. My name is Julie Kurtz. I am the CEO and the founder for the Center for Optimal Brain Integration. And I've had the blessing to co-author 6 books on trauma and resilience. And most of those are early childhood focused. So we've got a lot to talk about today, Amy, don't we?
We do. And Julie, let me tell you a little bit about the format here for the podcast. So what we typically do is take a question, and then you are the person to provide the answer. So the question that you're going to answer today is something that our UPK team gets asked a lot from administrators and from teachers. It's one of the most challenging things that we feel like is happening in the classroom right now, and that's behaviors in the classroom. So our question that we're posing to you is, why are we seeing so many challenging behaviors in young children right now?
Oh my gosh, you're not alone. It's not unique to you or your county. I train all over the country and it's happening everywhere. However, let's start with a basic foundational knowledge about the brain. Children have immature nervous systems, especially under the age of 6. They haven't been on the planet very long. They don't have a lot of skills to learn how to identify feelings and regulate feelings. So later we're going to talk a little bit about how to do that. So we know that that's true for kids that are coming to us in the TK world. Secondly, post-pandemic, we have to remember that during the pandemic, there was enormous amounts of stress for adults and communities. And when our stress increases for the adults around us, children absorb that stress of the adults. And what happens is children are absorbing the nervous system stress of the adults, so they are increasing their stress levels as well. Plus, children were isolated. Families were isolated. They didn't have the social skills that actually aid in building regulatory capacities, social skills. So a lot of children post-pandemic, from the stress they absorbed, from the isolation, from the lack of social skills, from increased media use, are coming to schools. 6-year-olds are more developmentally like 3-year-olds. 4-year-olds might be developmentally like 2-year-olds. So the brain development didn't have the same chance to develop during the pandemic as it would have if children were in school regularly. So we're seeing a lot of that. So I think those are big factors. I'll say one more, and that's the screen time. Increased screen time is preventing children from developing through play and social interaction, the regulatory capacities that are needed that happen naturally through play. But I'll pause there because those are the big things.
No, that's okay. And Julie, I know we have a lot of conversation about the pandemic and the post-pandemic life, and it feels like sometimes we like default to that, like, well, it's the pandemic and it's a result of the pandemic. But in this case, the children that are coming to school, so again, children coming this school year will be the youngest ever. They will be 4 by September 1st. So the group that is in TK now and the group that is coming were really born during the height of the pandemic. They were born or getting all of that interaction during the time when everybody was pretty much on lockdown or coming out of lockdown, and the world was very different.
Absolutely true. These are pandemic babies, and they didn't and haven't been exposed to the same social skills, interactions, play, and to survive. Their parents, all of us had to survive by working while our kids were at home. We put them on tablets and TV and social media to survive. This is not a blaming thing. This is just reality. And so the brains develop much differently. And so we also have to be prepared that these children are coming with very immature nervous systems, and we need to learn, what do I need to do to help them and look at this differently? Plus, TK is a very, very new thing in California. And so do we act like academics, like K through fifth, or do we act more like pre-K? And it's really important for us to have that conversation.
Yeah, and Julie, I'm glad you mentioned that because so this podcast is really tailored to administrators and teachers. And one of the things that we know is that especially most administrators, there's no child development in their preparation program. As administrators, they're not receiving information on child development. And some of the teachers are, that was not a part of their multi-subject program, and they're gaining some of that information afterwards. And the common ground is that they all want to do the best that they can for young children. They're doing the best that they know how to do. They're just not familiar with how children 0 to 5 typically develop and what happens in that time. So can you talk a little bit about the brain and what that looks like in a child that would be entering TK?
I mean, this is such an important conversation because a lot of elementary teachers are being asked to now step into the TK world, and they have been trained with a mindset that we teach academics, we teach curriculum, and there is sometimes a lack of familiarity that developmentally children under the age of 6 are building 1 million new neurosynaptic connectors in their brain every second. Wow. Which is really important to know that we can make a difference. We don't have to blame the families. We don't have to blame the pandemic. We have to just think, what do I need to do? And so the mindset we need to have is really around play. Play is an important aspect of learning, and it's child-directed play that is a priority in learning. And that's a different way of thinking, where preschool classrooms are set up with stations, where children might go to a dramatic play area, they might go to a science area, they might go to the painting and art area, they might have block area. And we don't realize that that's how academics happens for that age, is self-directed play, some teacher-directed play, some teacher direction, but it involves more of that than it does sit at a table and let me lecture to you. And the capacity is not there yet developmentally, but it is when we create a classroom that looks more like a pre-K classroom. I think it's really important to know that we need to shift our mindset around that.
So the environment in the classroom, you're saying, is important. So as the children are developing, their brains are developing, and they're experiencing learning rather than sitting and getting learning, they're experiencing their learning, right? And building those neurons as they play. The classroom environment can either help or maybe hinder some of those behaviors from happening in the classroom. So teachers have an opportunity to set their classroom environment up in a way that may help to minimize, not erase behaviors, because, you know, we say in our office, the behaviors are challenging. That's what we hear. What do we do about challenging behaviors? But they're challenging to adults. Some of these behaviors are very typical of this age group. So teachers can help to support what is typical in children and kind of minimize some of the behavior by the way the environment is set up.
Absolutely. I mean, let's look at all the ways we can reduce dysregulated behavior, because there is not one child from 0 to 12th grade, 0 to 18 years old, that can learn when they have high levels of stress. So one of the things that I really want to talk about today is how to reduce stress in the nervous system for children who are coming to our schools with high levels of stress, immature nervous systems. One way that we just talked about is moving our mindsets to learn more about pre-K classrooms than elementary classrooms. So these children need to learn by having stations set up that encourage interest areas that allow them to learn. I mean, building blocks, tall, learning the word tall, learning colors, all happen naturally through that play. But I also want to talk about some other key things, because when you have an immature nervous system, the number one strategy to reduce challenging behavior, and we're going to talk about several, the number one strategy is the adult staying calm and regulated, because children under the age of 6 calm their nervous systems through adults. And so when adults get dysregulated in a classroom, children are absorbing through something we in the science world or the psychology world call mirror neurons. Have you ever met somebody, Amy, and you got a bad feeling or the EBGBs, or you're around somebody who had toxic energy, you're like, I got to get away from this person, I'm absorbing it. That's what mirror neurons are. So adults have to realize that building a relationship with their kids, greeting kids at the door, helping children feel safe when they are dysregulated, staying calm so children can borrow their calm to calm their own nervous systems. Children who like their teachers, who feel safe with their teachers, will have fewer dysregulated behaviors.
So, Julie, I've heard you mention, and just to help our administrators and teachers who might be listening understand, when you say regulated and dysregulated, what does regulation look like in children, and like in the dysregulation piece, like what might that look like? Now, some people might think it always looks like out of control behavior, but that may not be the way it presents.
Yes, I could be here for hours talking to you about these things, but a dysregulated, so an immature nervous system is a child, it takes 25 years, by the way, to develop a mature nervous system. A mature nervous system looks like somebody who has their emotional buttons pushed, they don't feel safe, or they have big feelings, or something happens that stresses them out, and the nervous system sets off the alarms. And a dysregulated behavior is a child or an adult that moves into fight, flight, or freeze. Fight is the acting out behaviors, destroying property, hurting others, hurting myself. Flight is when I'm a runner. I run away, I escape, I hide under a table, I avoid circle time, I avoid things. I might even run out of the classroom. And freeze is not a common one that we see, because children who shut down emotionally or go hide over somewhere isn't causing any disruption, so we often ignore them. All three children have moved into dysregulated behaviors. And I often like to say that it's causing harm to themselves, others, or property. And so a mature nervous system means I can have my emotional buttons pushed, but I can find ways, I can be aware of how I'm feeling, the size of my feelings. I can recognize that I'm being hijacked by the part of my brain that wants me to mobilize to hurt others, myself, or things around me. But I can stop that by being aware of my feelings and using strategies to calm them. And once I'm calm, my thinking brain wakes up and I can make choices that don't cause harm. That takes 25 years to learn. So when you're under the age of 6, you actually need to be taught those skills. We can't assume, we must first remember that punishing, blaming, shaming, criticizing, using stickers, or bribing is not going to teach them. It's going to cause them more distress in their nervous system, which results in more challenging behaviors.
So, Julie, I'm glad that you mentioned the social emotional, because that is a huge piece of the TK classroom work, which every grade level is teaching some component of social emotional development. But it seems as though with TK, this is the foundation of what we're learning. It's a part of the California Preschool TK Learning Foundations. There's a whole domain dedicated to social emotional development in young children. So talk to us a little bit about what that looks like in the classroom, and the importance of teachers understanding that that's part of their role to teach social emotional skills, because the children are not coming in with those skills.
Oh my gosh. First of all, I got nervous to be on this podcast. I don't know how to use Skype, and I was nervous. And when you get nervous, your thinking brain shuts down, right? It literally shuts down for adults and for everybody. 90% of the time, the part of your brain that allows you to focus, have sustained focal attention, to learn in school, to treat people with kindness, to have empathy, to problem solve, all shuts down 90% of the time when our stress levels increase. So let's just get out of the way. This is true for all of us. But children are coming to our classrooms with very immature nervous systems. But I do want to add something else, Amy. 50% of our children in the United States under the age of 6 have experienced trauma. So now let's add traumatic stress, toxic stress from the pandemic, delays in development from the pandemic, technology delaying development. So we've got a lot of things contributing to increased stress levels and immaturity of the nervous system. So let's go back to your question. We have to have relational regulation, teachers that are calm to calm children, teachers that prioritize building relationships to help them feel safe. But there's something else that's absolutely critical. Not one child in that classroom that you have will learn unless they feel calm, safe, and regulated, which we can do through environment strategies and relational regulation. But we have to have an added piece, and that is intentionally bringing in the most important academic piece that's going to allow children to be humane and to be regulated. And that's intentionally teaching social and emotional skills. I don't know if you want me to go into what I think are the most important.
I would love that. If you could give us an example of something that would be that a TK teacher is teaching in her classroom that is a social emotional skill. Maybe they're not even aware they're doing it, Julie. They're probably doing it all day long. And if they dug through the foundations, they'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm covering all of this. But it is important, those skills, getting those out into the classroom and making that a part of their curriculum. So yes, absolutely. Please share what you think.
And we're going to share a lot of links of some examples, but there's a lot of curriculum out there. So let's start with some of the most important things. And I think this is true for all grades, by the way. I think that we do earthquake drills and fire drills and active shooter drills in schools. But what we really also need to focus on, why do we do these earthquake and fire drills and active shooter drills? Because the more we practice with kids when they're calm, when and if the real emergency comes, we would have wired their brain through practice as to what to do when the real emergency happens. So let's look at this through the lens of social emotional. We have children with immature nervous systems for whatever reason. Even if there was no pandemic right now, you've got a child with immature nervous systems in your classroom. They don't have a lot of skills. They've been on the planet 3, 4, 5 years. So we need to teach them, and I'm going to break it down into 4 important categories. We need to teach them emotional literacy, emotion words. We need to teach them what it feels like in their body and how to recognize it in others. Second, we need to teach them the size of their emotions, how to recognize in the moment, is my feeling right now small, medium, or large? Because when it's medium and large, that's when we have the potential to hurt others, ourselves, or things around us. And third, we need to teach them self-regulation strategies. When my feelings are big, I have the potential to hurt others, myself, or things around me. So I need to learn strategies that are going to calm my body so my thinking, reasoning brain wakes back up, called the prefrontal cortex, so I can solve my problem for the greater good, solve my problem without hurting things, others. And those are the big 3 steps. Emotional literacy, identifying the size of my emotions, and how to calm my emotions so that I can do the 4th step, which is solve the problem without hurting others, myself, or things around me. So when Jeremy takes my shovel while I'm playing with it in the middle of the sandbox and my emotional buttons are pushed, I have a high potential to run and hit him, pull his hair, and push him. But if I've learned how to identify my feelings and I've practiced with teachers over and over what to do instead, then I will be more apt to have developed a habit of, let me use my breathing techniques, let me go to a teacher, and let me do other choices that will allow us to keep our classroom safe and friendly and kind and respectful.
So Julie Kurtz, I feel like we could have a whole nother podcast. I don't think that this is enough time to talk about all the things, right? Because I feel like I want to ask you about strategies, and I want to ask you about how can teachers do this and how can administrators support that. And so I feel like I'm going to have you back,
Yes.
maybe another time, to talk about those specific things. But again, would you tell everybody the name of your organization? So if they wanted to look you up, where could they find you? And we'll include the link, but where would they be able to find you?
So at www.optimalbrainintegration.com, which will be linked with the podcast, we have a lot of resources that you can explore to promote social emotional skills. And we've got social media sites that promote that, like our YouTube channel where we interview teacher Teresa. She takes us on a 15-minute tour of her classroom and all these strategies she uses. If you want to explore some things right away before Amy and I one day schedule part 2 with some concrete strategies.
Right. So let me recap for our audience a little bit about what we heard. So number one, we have to the challenging behaviors, we have to understand brain development. Number one, how do young children's brains develop? What are they capable of? What are they not capable of at that time? That's number one.
Yep.
Second, we're looking at the relationship between the teacher and their environment, and that is going to help them to feel regulated and ready to learn.
Yes.
And your third, social emotional development being taught in the classroom as a part of the curriculum, every bit as important as math and literacy and sciences and fine motor, all of that. Social emotional development, right on par with those.
Wow, you have such great listening skills. I'm so impressed. And can I close with one thing?
Sure.
Remember that you are a brain architect if you are a teacher. And with
Yes.
1 million new neurosynaptic connectors happening every second between 0 and 6, the most brain development ever, everything you do will teach a child to be more humane, to develop resilience skills, and to develop those social emotional skills that are required to hold a job, to hold a relationship, to manage difficult, stressful things every single day without hurting others, ourselves, or things around us. So thank you for having me on to elevate this.
You are welcome. Thank you for agreeing to be on and for pre-agreeing to be on for another episode, because I think we need to bring you back to kind of dive in more, because we did talk a little bit about what the cause was, which was our original question. Why are we seeing so many challenging behaviors? And you mentioned all of the stressors and things that are going on that do that. But I think our listeners would want to know, okay, now what? How do I support those children? Because at the core, our administrators, our teachers, their aides and assistants, they really want to help those children. They're doing the best and they want the best. So we want to be able to support that the best that we can. So your expertise certainly helps us in this. I'm so grateful that you agreed to be on. We will link all of your resources and we definitely will schedule part 2. Thank you, Julie.